Welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. We believe life is about how we react. Welcome back to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. Thanks for tuning in today. We have a couple things to check in on. Kyle, it was a big week for you. I assume you got your keys?
Yeah, man, it's kind of crazy because it's all up to me now. Like, if something goes wrong with the place, it's on me. Like, that's the huge difference between owning and renting, right? If something goes wrong,
Sure.
right, like in my apartment, I just call the front office and have them fix it. But now it's on me. So yeah,
That's what I imagine it's like with kids, right? If like I don't have kids, so if I'm hanging out with little kids or friends or babysitting or whatever, when something goes wrong, I can just give them back, send them home. But if they were mine, I'm stuck with them.
Yeah. No, my heater,
Anyway.
my water heater went out in my apartment one night, and I just called them and they replaced it like the next day, but it's going to be much different now.
Yeah, that's true. Well, congratulations. Now, I imagine the big challenge is moving, which I think you're doing this week, right? Have you started packing
Yeah,
yet?
I've got a bunch of boxes like stacked in the corner in my apartment, so when the movers come, they can just load them into the truck, so that's good.
Movers?
Yeah.
You're not going to just do it yourself?
No. My friends would disown me. They'd be like, no, we're not doing this.
Do you have friends coming too, or just professionals?
No, I have friends too, because,
Cool.
I'm not all that great at, like, carrying things,
All right. Are your movers packing for you, or is that on you and your friends?
That's on me. So I've been working. Felicia has been coming over out of the kindness of her heart and helping me pack up, and so we'll be ready when the movers come. So
I'm sitting here thinking, I agree, very kind. But I wonder if Felicia knew it would come up on the podcast once or twice. So maybe she's doing it just to save face. She doesn't probably really want to help you move. Like, how many friends really want to help another friend move?
No, I think what's happening is that she knows if I get in a pickle where, last minute I'll call her and then it'll be an even bigger problem. So she's trying.
It's just easier if she's in the vicinity. All right. I get that. Cool.
I want to check in about your chapters that you were going to read last week.
Done. Finally got a one thing complete. I even started a little bit early. Discovered I had a couple audiobook chapters left, so that was a nice, easy jump start to the week. And then months ago, I had purchased a book that a friend recommended, thinking it was an audio version, and it was not. So it's just a digital version, which, I gotta read it on my screen, which I'm not a fan of.
Yeah.
So that was disappointing, but certainly been able to every night just spend a little bit of time back in the book. So getting through that book is the big task right now, but I'm caught up.
Nice. The thing I like about your one thing from last week is like, all right, 5 chapters, that's not impossible, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be something that is really, really hard, especially when you're bouncing back from not completing yours,
Totally.
Let's put something down that is pretty easy to tick off, and let's get some momentum going, right?
Yeah, that's the whole point. Just one thing, right? I didn't put down read a novel,
right?
So you gotta break it up.
Yeah.
Kyle, I've got a question I want to ask you, and maybe generate some thoughts for our guest. we've been doing the one thing for this season, and obviously in our personal lives over the years, we both have set goals and have been working towards different objectives over time. I want to know, is there anything in your life, even just either last 3 months, 6 months, year, whatever, is there anything specific in your life that you can identify as an area that you have made improvements in on purpose?
On purpose. One thing that comes to mind, especially right now, when we're all kind of at home a whole lot more and kind of in our own heads, is really consciously like thinking about how other people are handling their situation and how I might be able to just be conscious of that. I in the past like 10 years, and maybe this is just part of growing up a little bit, I just turned 39, and so obviously we're all getting a little older, and just being conscious of the difficulties of other people. Like I was saying, in the past 10 years, I've really focused on myself and improving myself. But I think more and more lately, I'm being conscious of how I fit into everything else and how I can help other people achieve as well.
Hmm.
So,
I see. So less self-centered.
yeah.
Is that what I'm hearing? All right.
Yeah, not I'm still self-centered, don't get me wrong, but
I said
I'm
less.
conscious of it now.
Yeah, for sure. But now I'm fully aware. On a ridiculous note, somebody I guarantee you is probably gonna make fun of me. But I've never been great or consistent at flossing. Like I do it a few times a week, maybe. And I mean, ask any dentist I've ever had, they would say, yes, he doesn't floss enough. And since I've gotten back during this season of the podcast, we got back on track with the weekly rhythm registers. We've been marking our one things, and one of the things that I've been keeping track of is my discipline of flossing daily. And
Nice.
I have flossed daily for a good 5 months. That's
Wow,
impressive.
dude. How many
So
people can say that, right?
yeah, yeah, I am feeling good about that habit. I have certainly made improvements there to build that discipline.
So what happens when you go to the dentist next time and they're like, "You need to floss more." And you're like, "What the heck? I have been."
I'm just gonna go with it. It's like, yeah, okay. Like I'm not here to argue.
Yeah, yeah.
And is there a thing that's too much flossing? I
Yeah,
still
I don't
only
know.
do it once a day. So I don't know. Maybe I should be doing it after every time I eat. I don't know.
That's a good question. I've never heard anyone say that their dentist told them they need to floss more,
Dude, you
right?
need to back off
Or
the floss.
less. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've never heard that story either.
Sean, I understand that you have something that you've been thinking about that is the content for our episode today. And so, can you introduce the topic for us?
It will, but something just comes to mind when you're saying that. You started by saying you're less self-centered, and then you're giving me the floor. I want to say I'm proud of you, man. Thank you.
It's a manifestation. I'm
Yes,
growing up.
yes, that's it. So recently, what's been heavy on my mind is this concept or idea, principle that we sometimes get confused or maybe forget that there's power in numbers, right? I think so much of our life we want more, right? Think about moving. You probably want more than one mover to show up. You want 2, 3, 4, 5 people to come help you. Money, we always want more. We want to save more. We want to earn more. When it comes to parties or celebrations, we want more friends and family to come over and help celebrate the 39th birthday or 40th or
Yeah.
21st or whatever it may be, right? In so many instances, we want more time, more everything. But then I realized recently, Kyle, this is something I wrote about in the column that I get to be a part of or publish with Bio News, or specifically Friedrich's Ataxia News, which our listeners can look at. We'll link it in the show
Mhm.
notes. But I had written specifically about this recent thing that's been sticking out in my mind, and that's the route that most of us take when life gets hard. We tend
Mhm.
to shut down, or we tend to isolate. And when we need more people and more family and more friends surrounding us, in those moments of hardship, we seclude ourselves or isolate ourselves. And I'm trying to figure out why. I have
Yeah.
some ideas, but I wonder what the overall reasoning is. What's everybody's story? In fact, we've heard you talk about it. You get diagnosed. Your parents went to meetings and different resources without you because you just weren't willing to talk
Right.
about it or
Totally.
address it or dive in. So I'm curious, between you, our listeners, why do we think we do it this way?
I a couple thoughts. I think a lot of it is maybe part of it is denial. Like we have this in the case of being diagnosed, right? We have this vision of our lives before we were diagnosed, and in that moment that vision gets crushed, and it's really hard to totally switch our vision and make
Mm,
reality match up with or make our vision match up with what's actually happening in our lives. And I think that's a big part of it. Specifically,
mm,
well, for me, I had this vision of my life, um, picket fence and two and a half
mm,
kids and a dog, and living in suburban America, married, and I mean, partly, not all of that is on my FA diagnosis. That's not why, but I just think that certain things happen in our lives, and they're different than what we expect.
sure. No, I can certainly relate. I am in a different place in life than I imagined 20 years ago, right? I'm not the 39-year-old Sean that I originally had expected to be when I was in college or high school or way back when.
Yeah. Partly, does that feel like a failure if you don't reach the potential or the vision that you had?
Yeah, and if it feels like a failure, or if it is, then that certainly makes sense as to why you wouldn't be loud about it, right? Nobody's
Yeah.
proud of those moments. Because another just silly examples that come to mind is, you can be on Instagram or Facebook and everybody's talking about their wedding day. But you don't see a lot of people celebrating their divorce or their failed
Mm.
marriage,
Yeah.
or some people celebrate their new job, but they don't announce that they got fired, So,
Yeah.
granted, I understand obviously some things are really easy to celebrate, such as marriage or a new baby or a new job, and other things aren't necessarily worth celebrating, like you wouldn't celebrate necessarily. So I just wonder, and maybe now that we're digging into it, I really feel like maybe we should reach out to our old friend from like long time ago, James Miller. I think we
Yeah.
need it, or even Heidi Bear. We need
Yeah.
somebody a little more mentally and psychologically conscious than you
Mhm.
to get on the show and help us wade through this.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so I'm thinking about your example of posting on social media because that's something that we're totally in control. Like, we
Yeah.
control that narrative, right? That everyone else sees of us. And in your column, I read that, we celebrate, it's easier to celebrate something other rather than celebrating a fall, right?
Oh,
I
sure.
forget, would you
Especially for FAers, yeah, we fumble and fall and break a bone or get bruised up pretty easily, as opposed to maybe showing off a fresh haircut. I think is the
Oh,
example I
that's
used.
what it was. Yeah. And so it triggered a thought for me is that, like, a few months ago, I was standing at the sink and I sneezed. And everyone with the FA knows how
Oh.
crazy a sneeze can be. And my head went down and I hit my head so hard
Mm.
on the sink. And I had a bleeding spot in the
Mm.
middle of my forehead. And I took a selfie and I was like, should I post this? And I was just trying to think of the um just the post and whatever, and ultimately I decided not to.
Mm.
And I did. I think it's a good thing to think about. Like, why didn't I post that? That was
Yeah,
my
what?
opportunity to relate to every. I mean, I've seen that picture before, right?
Sure. Do you know, or could you walk through that decision making process? Why did you choose not to share it?
I think it was an opportunity to relate to others, but I also felt like I didn't want to be insensitive about it. Um, because I think you and I both sort of struggle a little bit with, like, survivor's guilt, right? Um, our abilities are, there's no two ways about it. Like, we we're fortunate to have the abilities that we have at age
Mm-hmm.
39.
I I think I see. I think I can see where you're going. It's like, look at me, I sneezed and hit my sink, and somebody else might say, "Well, I sneezed and fell and broke a bone," or
Mm,
something a
yeah.
lot more drastic or serious. So I wonder. I don't necessarily think. Again, we're not psychologists, so maybe who knows. Um, I don't necessarily think that train of thinking is bad or unhealthy, but I wonder if it kind of puts us or traps us in a place of constantly comparing ourselves to others, which sometimes is good and healthy and needed, but sometimes we shouldn't do that. We're
Right.
all independent and unique human beings. So I wonder if that's an area that, not necessarily an area of concern, but an area that should be taken into consideration when working through our stuff uh, mentally.
Yeah, and it's so hard to be in control of the narrative. Like,
Mm.
if everyone could just see our lives, every post is a decision, and uh sometimes it feels like a lot of pressure to, like, be in charge of that, right?
Yeah.
Like, and maybe sometimes we don't want to let others down. We've built this narrative, um and image on social media specifically. But I think it plays in other areas where, you know, we don't want to divert from that thing that we built.
Yeah, and well, I think too, it's not just a social media image.
Right.
I mean, for the folks that you run around with and know you deeply and personally, social media is just one aspect of your life
Mm-hmm.
to them. Granted, social media is 100% of life for somebody you've never met, but maybe they've read your book or they've seen your film and they're just interested in how you live your life. And all they know is the Kyle or Sean on social media. So I totally understand that we want to kind of controlled the right narrative or a narrative that's important to us, but I wonder if in those attempts to control the narrative, I wonder if we're failing to be authentic.
That's a good point.
I don't know that we are, but I wonder. Because for me personally, you won't find a lot of uh, woe is me sort of posts on my social media. You'll find things that are honest. So, hey, here I am laying in the hospital because I broke my femur, but I'm smiling. I'm
Yeah.
laughing and
Yeah.
I'm making the most of it. I won't. I just choose not to post if when things go wrong. I don't think it's wrong or bad. I just I think I have this mentality that if that's what I'm constantly posting or sharing and talking about in life, even outside of social media, then I'm afraid people will begin to think, wow, he's so negative. He's
Mhm.
always the victim. And I just refuse to have that victim mentality all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think the authenticity thing is hard because we want these things for ourselves. We want to be positive. We want to be successful, and so those are the things that we talk about. We have these principles that we try to live by, and that's what we post about, what we talk about, what we try to live by. And then, in the secret parts of our lives, that's not always what happens, right?
Yeah.
And so those secret parts and those alone times that, not positive thoughts creep in and all that, um, if you're trying to be authentic, do you need to expose everything? And intentionality of positivity and success and, all that stuff, bringing that to the front, does that compete with authenticity at times, because those are the things you want but not all the time the things that really happen? I don't know, does,
Sure.
like, do you need to expose it all to be authentic, or are those two things work together?
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, I think in its most basic form, right? Authenticity would suggest that you're real and good or bad, right? Negative or positive. You're sharing it and living openly. I don't necessarily think that means you need to share it online.
Yeah.
I don't know that you need to share openly with the whole world, but I would think or argue that we probably need to be open to sharing bits and pieces of failure or
Mm-hmm.
heartache or letdowns or mistakes or
Weakness.
oh, totally. That's probably the hardest part, right? That's
Right.
especially if it's a failure or mistake because of a decision or choice you made. It's one thing. I go back to the broken femur last year, right? Uh, I don't necessarily think that was my fault, right? I don't think I did something that put me in harm's way.
Right.
But my failed marriage is something that I own 100%. So the difference, did I not talk about that very much because I made a choice there or several choices there? Like, I don't know.
I think those two things are good examples. Self blame or self perception is an important piece of that, right? Because in one case, like you were saying, it wasn't your fault; it was an accident. And in the other case, I'm not judging, but I'm using your words.
Yeah.
You're saying that you own that. And yeah, I think that's a big part of it. Maybe not. Maybe in the way we expose those things to other people, right? Because we're controlling the narrative that we think other people are thinking about us, right?
Yeah.
But I think we're also controlling the narrative of what we think about ourselves.
Sure.
And maybe those two narratives are very intertwined, what we want to project to others and what we think about ourselves.
Yeah. In my post, I had, or in the column, I wrote about how most likely some shame and embarrassment is what keeps us isolated in
Mm-hmm.
times of difficulty or pain. And now that we keep talking about it, I'm thinking, although they probably stem from shame and embarrassment, man, I'm thinking uh, image, status, what other people think of us, what we think of ourselves, pride, all that stuff. There's so much more probably that plays into those things than just a little bit of shame or some
Right.
massive embarrassment.
Right. So, Sean, can you think of an example where you're like, all right, I don't know if I should share this with whoever, my friend, and it worked out the opposite of what you thought. You reached out to somebody and you're like, oh, like I don't know if I should do this, but in hindsight, after you had shared whatever it was, you're like, I'm glad I did that, and I feel so much better now, and I have someone that I think I can count on and
Yeah.
trust.
I think I have a couple, and what comes to mind immediately, a conversation I had with a good friend of mine a couple weeks ago, also is what came up in our episode 50 interviews of each other a
Yeah.
long time ago. Um, so, for a lot of listeners that are maybe new to Sean's life, I was married once. That marriage failed, all because I dealt with and deal with the challenge, or what I believe to be a challenge, of same sex attraction. Um, And it wasn't until I began to talk about um, that side of my life that people began to connect even easier and much more deeply with me, because they have similar struggles. Maybe not the same struggle or the same
Right.
issue or the same conundrum in their life. I hate to call it a struggle, but the same conundrum. Um, but something also deeply rooted and personal that they're ashamed of or they didn't want to talk about. And I remember specifically episode 50, we talked about some things and I was nervous, right? That I was
Totally.
scared that about that episode going live. And I got more emails and
Mm-hmm.
comments and people reaching out saying thank you than I got people saying, well, F you, I'm out. Like, don't ever talk to
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
More like, well, you suck, you're going to hell. And that was what I thought I would get,
Right.
15 years ago or 12 years, whatever it was. And that's what I felt like I had experienced in that season of my life. But today, that's not the case. And
Yeah.
every now and then, the onesie twosies that say, "Yep, you're a failure," I that doesn't bother me at all. It's like, okay, we just have two different perspectives in life, and thanks for your opinion, but I don't give a shit.
And you have to weigh those two against the 35 positive responses that you got,
Yeah,
right?
totally.
So,
And not even just the 35 positive responses, but I've got to weigh that, good and bad, against myself, how I think of myself, how I
yeah, right.
accept myself, how I choose to live my life. At the end of the day, who I am and what I do and how I do it, that is 100% on me. And only I'm going to answer for those things someday, perhaps. Like, nobody else is going to come to my. To my rescue when I die, and I, perhaps stand before a judge and say, well, you did these four things right, and these
Yeah.
8,000 things wrong. Like, who's gonna argue on my behalf in that moment?
Right,
Nobody.
right.
So anyway, this I
Yeah,
feel like we're going 100 different ways with this conversation, but I absolutely value it.
yeah, no, I think, your example that you just gave really relates to when we have a diagnosis. You know, we think that the diagnosis is going to lead to people thinking we're weak, and this is going to negatively affect so many aspects of our lives, our jobs, our friendships, our everything. And then we share it with people and we open up, and we find there's so much support. And like you said, some friends go away, right? There's
Yeah.
one or two friends that go away, but you have to weigh that against the 35 others, like I said, that stick around and give you even more support, and you have to
Yeah.
go with that because that's how we get through.
You're hitting the nail on the head, right? Some friends will stick around, some friends don't, and I can relate with both sides. I don't think I had people in my life say, "Well, this is an unforgivable mistake,
Mm-hmm.
so good luck out there." Don't call me. And
Right.
nobody, no, I don't think anybody ever did that. Well, maybe two or one, but that really what I experience and what I've perceived. People don't necessarily announce that decision.
Right.
They
Right.
just simply fade away.
Yep.
And although they probably would never admit, like, yeah, no, I'm out, because they didn't make the effort to show any sort of support
Yeah.
or any effort at all to show anything at all. I
Right.
think that's just as strong a statement as "see you later" or "good luck." And
Right.
so I forget now where I was going with that, but as you were talking, I realized nobody really said you're the worst, but a lot of people just quit calling. A lot of
Right.
people quit reaching out. A lot of people quit uh, catching up and getting a beer or a burger together. And I think that's been rewarding and eye opening and taught me a lot about humanity. And I believe that's helped make me a better person, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. No answer is an answer.
Yeah,
Um,
right. Yeah.
and it also makes you appreciate the friendships that do stick around, and those friendships get incredibly stronger. You almost become grateful that some of those people aren't around anymore, right? Because why
Yeah.
do you need that baggage? Like, it's an
Yeah.
empty bag of BS.
Sure.
So yeah.
No, well, yeah, like I said, some of those friendships grow deeper. And I think, like I said earlier, as I get older, I appreciate the 10 to 15
Mm-hmm.
deeply rooted friends than 50 surface friends. Like, I
Right.
am totally content and really excited in my life to have a handful
Right.
of very close, intimate relationships, and I value that. You'd mentioned something about fear, and or no, you said a job. How will this disease or
Mm-hmm.
diagnosis affect my job? And it made me realize or think that some of the reason some people probably don't talk about it is fear.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Totally.
think it's important that we just give that credit for a minute because it's not always shame and embarrassment or failure or status. What if it is legitimate fear that they might get fired or lose their job or get laid off or, um, people may not be attracted to them anymore. They might be hard to date. It might be whatever the case. So I
Yeah.
think fear is a legitimate factor as well.
Yeah, I remember going in for a job interview near the end of college for an internship, and like trying not to recognize that fate, but like I'm stumbling in the door. Like there's no denying it. And I remember writing this piece about that time and thinking that it was like I was wearing a crazy mask that everyone could see, but I was trying to pretend it wasn't there, you know? And
Yeah.
so I don't know. It's an impossible situation though, because certainly physical abilities do uh, influence people's perception of your ability to perform, right?
Totally.
And so I just think it's really hard. And the more we can reassure each other and recognize those situations, maybe is what we need to do.
Yeah, and I think ultimately we reassure and encourage our community, our friends, our listeners through those authentic posts
Mm-hmm.
or stories that we've talked about, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's on the show or on social media. When we are not with just you and me, but everybody, when we're a little more open about some of the fears and mistakes and failures and comparisons that we make, maybe it actually helps us work through those faster, and it helps other people take on that job interview or take on the opportunity to go on a date or whatever the case may be.
Totally.
And Kyle, I'll be honest with you, I feel like this has turned into a bit of a counseling session for me personally. And I also feel like we could go on forever. Uh, but like I said, I really think we probably need some professional assistance here.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if anybody is listening, I would give us some feedback. If you're a professional, reach out, send us an email or a note, or if you want to come on the show and hash it out with us, we'd love to get your help.
I agree. Yeah, how many times have you had a conversation like this with a friend? I have a couple friends and they say like one sentence and I'm like, "What? Oh my gosh, like total breakthrough."
Oh
Just like,
yeah.
"Oh, that explains everything," you know? And so somebody with a different perspective and really knows what they're doing is really valuable.
That's true. Or maybe somebody that's walked through it before, right? Or
Yeah,
been
yeah.
in your shoes or whatever the
Totally.
case. So,
I think of our interview with Drew Dudley. You know, one of the things he said was like whether you're writing or talking or whatever is when people say, "Oh, I didn't know that." Okay, fine, that's cool. But what's even more powerful is when people say, "Oh my gosh, I thought I was the only one." And so sharing your experience and your stories and relating to others can lead to those moments.
yeah, that's good. I think that's especially relevant in the world of disability or rare
Yeah.
disease. Oh my gosh, I thought I was the only one.
Yeah.
And with that in mind, Kyle, I'm honored that we have a show like this, that we have a bit of a platform to connect with folks in the rare disease world, because you and I were both there once. You know, I
Totally.
thought I was alone. Thought I was the only one this weird or this crazy or this sick or broken. And I'm glad that we're not the only ones, and I'm glad that we've been able to connect with people around the world. And I really do hope that people are experiencing similar connections in their lives as well, especially when dealing with rare disease diagnoses.
Sean, that's so powerful, and I think we could talk about this stuff all day because it's so relevant. But we need to move on. Let's talk about our one thing. What is the one thing you're going to do this week to get you to a larger goal?
Well, my one thing this week really has nothing to do with the topic at hand, but it is something that I'm going to actively uh, get done. And totally random, but earlier this year, my computer totally crashed on me. I had to go out and buy a new one. My old Mac, it was definitely old, just won't fire up anymore, won't stay powered on. Thankfully, I discovered the hard drive is probably safe and fine. So I was able to watch YouTube videos and buy a couple little tools on Amazon, and I took that old Mac apart and pulled out my old hard drive, and it is fine. I was able to access most of my
Yeah.
old files and different things that I had saved. So now I've got this old, huge 27-inch Mac sitting on my kitchen table. It's been there
Wow.
for weeks. I need to get rid of it. So this week, I'm going to figure out how and where I can recycle this old piece of technology and get rid of it.
So you're not just gonna do what you do with batteries. You're not just gonna throw it in the
No,
dumpster.
no, you can't just throw batteries in the dumpster, Kyle. We've talked about this, and I have grown. Okay, I have made improvements in my life, and I know that there's a process to get rid of hazardous and e-waste, and I need to figure that process out.
Sean, I am so proud of you. Awesome. All right. Well, my one thing is that I'm finally going to get rolling more with the HOA. You know, this is something I talked about a few episodes ago. And I need to make some accessibility modifications to my condo that I now own. And so I am going to get things rolling with them. Now that I own the condo, it's a little easier to, talk to them and get things rolling. So that's my one thing for this week.
So quantify that a little bit for me. How are you gonna get things rolling? Is that an email, a phone call, a letter? What's that one thing to get it rolling?
I've got a phone call with the maintenance guy. He's kind of the first level.
Sweet.
And then I'll go to the front office and then maybe the board of the HOA. And
Cool.
so it's just kind of getting that going.
Yeah, you got a starting point, which is half the battle sometimes.
Yep.
Well, of course, Kyle, as you and our listeners know, we wrap up with a thank you note. We both believe it's important to exercise gratitude on a regular basis. So my thank you this week goes out to a coworker friend of mine. Her name is Jeanette. She works in our corporate office, but is very active in our day-to-day operations at store level. And we're in two different buildings, two different towns. In our company, of course, we utilize the mail service to move tangible mail from one building to another. And she had sent me this week a package of Biscoff cookies or crackers, whatever you want to call them. And Biscoffs happen to be one of my favorite snack items. You can eat them with coffee. They're great in the morning, great in the afternoon, whatever. And so she went and bought me a package and sent them to me in the mail. So it was some of the best mail to open early on in the week. So thank you, Jeanette, for thinking of me.
So what can you not send in inter-office mail? I mean, if you can send food products in inter-office mail, like what's the line, man?
Well, you probably shouldn't send perishable food, like maybe super fragile, like eggs. Don't do that. But no, there's sky's the limit.
Nice, I like it. All right, well, my thank you note has to do with food as well. I've been really busy with the Rider Taxi Global Challenge lately, and I've been moving and buying a new condo and all that. And Jen Farmer has just been so incredibly supportive. She brought me in food, and I think I ate her food four nights in the last few weeks.
Wow.
And it's just been a load off, Obviously, one of the big things, not only like deciding what to eat, but actually going to the store, getting it, fixing food and all that.
Sure.
And, it's just been taken care of. And so it's been really, really nice. And thank you to Jen Farmer.
Thank you, Jen. She's fed me a few times as well, so I'll say thank you. With that, we are thankful to our listeners, of course, for always listening to our show. Thank you for being here this week and listening to us ramble. We look forward to talking with you next week or next episode.
And until then, keep living with urgency. Thank you for listening to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast.
Find us online at twodisableddudes.com and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Special thanks to our friend and audio producer, Jake Tompkins.